Hi guys, how are you? Welcome to our Monitor Mythbusters webinar. It's 10 p.m. here in Australia, and it's our ICA COVID-19 policy to keep people out of pubs. So you don't go out drinking, you got to sit in and sit at your laptop and talk about monitors. So this is something we've been talking about doing for quite a while, and because we get so many questions about monitors and what we should buy and what we should do, how much, why are they so expensive. So I was chatting with Stuart Pointon, who's my good buddy here in Brisbane, and he does a lot of calibration, and we said we should do something. Now, we couldn't do it live because there'd be too much moving around, so you will watch a movie. But then we got a few guests coming on afterwards just to talk about their experience of monitors and what they use in their facilities. And so I'm going to go to Dario first. Dario's from New York. Dario, tell us a bit about yourself and what do you use?
So quick background. I was an editor for 20 years. I became a colorist over 10 years ago. Been mostly freelance and just recently landed at a company called Bonfire. I have an FSI on a personal system, and my client monitor is a BT300 Plasma, which is still holding up under all the calibrations. And then recently when I set up the Bonfire suite, I was able to get a PVM A250 from Sony for my hero monitor. And then I picked up the Panasonic FZ1000 as my client monitor, and I chose that for a specific reason over the LC9. We can get into that in conversation, and that's kind of the background of my suite. And I use Resolve as a color correction system. Cool.
Kevin?
Yeah, well, I've been a colorist since the 80s. Started out in telecine, film, music videos, commercials, TV. Did a while at Da Vinci, director of training, got out into software and worked in that. So I'm freelance. I've been freelance since I worked on movies. And in my home suite, I have a couple of Asus UCX monitors, PA32 UCX monitors. And then when I'm working as a freelancer, of course, I pretty much see everything. A lot of Flanders, obviously. I do work at Dolby, so I worked on the Pulsar. X300 was a favorite of mine. So I've seen quite a gamut of monitors.
Cool. Wade, how are you, man?
Wade's muted.
I think you're on mute.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm Wade Odlum, senior colorist and partner from Alter Ego in Toronto, Canada. We specialize in high-end post-production for commercials, feature films, documentaries, music videos, all that sort of stuff. We have 5 base lights and 5 flame suites, and they're all running the LG OLED screens calibrated with light boxes to display the same output. So in total, we have about 20 of the LG screens, and I can talk later on about why we chose them versus the other options. But
well, yeah. So that's a real post house then.
It depends on your scale.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Stuart, what's your story, buddy?
Me, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. Okay. Yeah, I've 40 years in broadcast television, cinematography support with rental houses, AV commercial, product marketing, looked after Panasonic Broadcast for 10 years, and do bits and pieces, lots of teaching and training for various people here in Australia. And then caught up with you, Mr. Eagle. And I run my own little company called BenQ, which I do display calibration and help people with color and cameras and anything to do with creating content, really.
Great. Okay, well, that's good. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We're going to run this movie. Please use the chat pod to ask questions. We'll attempt to answer them during the show, but then we'll have our discussion afterwards where we can generally talk about your options and what you've seen or anything else. The movie will run for around 50 minutes. So once it gets going, you can obviously get up and get yourself a drink and walk around and sit and watch it. I've seen it once or twice. Yeah. Hi, my name is Warren Eagles.
My name's Stuart.
And we are going to be discussing monitor options for colour correction around or under the $5,000 mark. So the reason for this basically is because we get quite a lot of questions through the Colorist Academy. I'm sure you do as well, Stuart. Yep. Can I get a monitor? They're so expensive, and we're not talking about the HDR ones here. We're just talking about your standard sort of Rec 709 monitor type. They're still quite expensive for people. If we're staying for $5,000, and one of my answers to that, if you could make a cheap grading monitor, then Blackmagic would have already done it.
Yep, yeah. That's for sure.
We're going to start with the Eizo. So this is actually the CG319X, and this is probably their flagship monitor if we're not talking HDR. So we're talking SDR for this one. It's 4K, self-calibrate, and it's 32, which is quite important if you're looking at the size of the monitor.
So it has a peak luminance of 350 nit and a contrast ratio of 1500 to 1. So for SDR grading, of course, 350 nit is not where you want to be. You want to be at the 100 nit. So if you're looking for a roundabout way of figuring out what your black level will be on the LCDs, then you simply get the 100 nit and divide it by 1500. So you can expect the black level on the Eizo of about 0.067 of a nit. And I've calibrated probably a dozen or so of the Eizos, and they tend to sit around about that 0.067 to about 0.7 of a nit. So it's pretty accurate. The uniformity on the 319 is pretty good. So uniformity is not just about luminance, uniformity from across the screen, but also color white point uniformity as well. So
if we're looking at something like a white,
correct,
it's good for uniformity, isn't it?
Yeah. So when that uniformity, we look at of how even it is across the screen, whether there's any vignette or whether there's any fall off, which is quite common with a lot of monitors, but the Eizo is pretty good. The Eizo is a true 10-bit panel, so you'll find that a lot of panels will be called 10-bit, but they actually use an 8-bit with what's called FRC, a frame rate control. So that's basically like a dithering between two of the colors to create the perception of a greater bit depth. HDMI in, but it has no SDI. It's a wide gamut monitor. It's around about the Adobe RGB color space, and for calibration that's really useful because that means we can get pretty well 100% calibration accuracy within to the Rec 709 color space. And one thing I've found with the 319 also, it's got thermal stability built in, so in rooms which may vary in temperature, the white point will stay pretty well rock solid. The other thing I like about the 319 is that it's got good calibration slots, so you can go and create calibrations and in different slots and call them up for whatever you need. So, and it integrates with Lightspace and CalMan, and yeah, it's a really nice monitor.
Yeah, from my point of view, I've been using it in here for probably a year now. It's connected via this Blackmagic Ultra Studio. I did have a problem with it using the little mini here, the mini monitor, and it was losing sync, and I'm not sure if that's been resolved, but it's rock solid with this guy. This guy is around $1,000 though, and since I've used that, HDMI out of there into here enables me to get my full screen picture. In terms of my viewing angle, now I think this is pretty good. Now this is the problem you have if I was grading here and I'm normally in the center of my monitor, trackball's there, GUI to the left, Stuart's the client. Now he could be seeing a slightly different image, and this is a problem we do see with newer monitors now that we never used to have with older CRT technology, and this is pretty good with me moving off axis like this. So I think this guy's pretty good for viewing.
The angle of view is important. You're right, a lot of the monitors are quite poor on the angle of view. You've got to be sitting straight down in front of those screens.
Yeah, so in terms of the ease of use on this guy, I like the fact they do have buttons right up on the front here. So you can just go in there, you can tap like that, do this. Other thing that it has a self-calibrator. Now, Stuart will probably say, well, it's not quite, you know, it's not going to get you there. And one of the reasons is it has a little sensor that will drop out, a little probe that will drop out, and it will drop down, like you can probably just see it there, but it's only doing that part of the screen, isn't it?
Which is one of the worst parts of uniformity usually.
So,
not doing the center of the screen.
I would say, though, it's probably better than nothing. Yeah, you know, it's not doing a bad job, but you're always going to get a better result by obviously using one of these guys.
Well, there's two components. The actual calibration probe you use, but also the software to create that LUT.
Yes.
And that's where you get a far better result using, well, I use Lightspace, but there's CalMan as well, I guess. But the probe is the most important aspect of it. They're using highly accurate probes. In
terms of cost, this guy, let's just go back here, is around, I've got there $5.5 US, that sort of money. So we're just tipping at the $5,000 US mark. And also there is a newer model, which is a 27, which is not a true 4K, but it's coming in at around $2,500. But it's sort of whether you want 4K. So certainly the pluses here is 4K plus it's 32, which is a slightly bigger screen size, and we will see some of the others later that are a little bit smaller. So, and it's been good. Eizo as a well-known brand, so perception is good. You know, if you were working with VFX or you're working remotely with post houses or production companies or studios, you say, I've got an Eizo, straight away people will go, yeah, we know that. That's a good monitor, trusted monitor there. Stuart, number one, it has a Rec. 709 preset straight out of the box. That will be good for 2 years. Is that true?
No, it's not even using.
But it says it's a Rec. It says it's a Rec. 709 preset.
Yeah, I know. I have arguments with the manufacturers who love their product and understand that, and they say it's factory calibrated and so therefore never need to be calibrated ever again. Big myth. Firstly, a screen is an analog device, so it will change. Even though it might be digital inside, the actual screen to display the picture is analog. You have backlight, you have organic filters, and they will change, and they do change usually more significantly in the first 20 to 100 hours. So for an OLED, you would normally give it 100 hours, and an LCD can be less. But there is a change there. But they will definitely change over time as they age. So, and their Rec. 709, they don't spend 2 hours making a LUT. Usually they'll do a very fast run for calibration.
The only exception will be the Flanders, which we'll look at later, which are individually calibrated with a LUT before you get it.
They are, but even a Flanders screen will age because that's the nature of the beast.
So the real thing is, out of the box, the first, if we want to say 6 months or 3 months, depending how much you use it, is the critical time when things are going to probably drift more.
Yes.
Yeah. We've now swapped the Eizo out for the Asus. Asus are from Taiwan. Probably heard their name. They make a lot of computers, laptops, really big in making a lot of hardware in that respect. It is a UHD monitor, 32 in size that you can see. It's capable of 1200 nits. So the interesting thing about this is you can use this in an HDR situation, which is the only one we're looking at. So we'll talk about a bit more when we get some pictures in. They don't make this model anymore. They're going to be making the UCXP. And then later on in the year, they've got another monitor coming where it's going to be 1600 nits, 1000 nits across the screen, which means we can have 1000 nit grading without dimming, which is the little problem you have on this monitor. No price for that, but if you wanted to get the equivalent model today, we're looking at about $4,500 US for that. It's good. I've been testing it in here for SD, good. HDR, it's great for testing. I'm not sure it's quite up to working on client jobs yet. So we'll go to the next, and I'll say you've had this across the bench, Stuart, haven't you?
Yeah, I was interested to have a look at this when you got this from Asus, especially for the HDR, because that's the question everyone's trying to get a HDR monitor that's not $30,000 plus, and it's a really good attempt. I've got to say, you have to give Asus a lot of credit for their engineering. In all essence, it's not a replacement for a Sony X310 or a Flanders or a Pointon or a TV Logic or a Canon true HDR monitor. It has some issues, as you mentioned, around the dimming in terms of HDR, but if you were looking at a HDR monitor you said to learn about it, to practice on, excellent choice. I've been impressed by Asus's listening and wanting to get feedback. I actually measured 1000 nit across the screen in its HDR mode, and you have a calibration slot within the HDR mode as well that's available to you. So you have a calibration slot in the SDR, and you have a calibration slot dedicated for HDR, which is really good. I was impressed by the RGB linearity was pretty good. It calibrated very well in SDR, and it could also calibrate up to in the HDR world. As you said, it's just that dimming area is the one that's causing everybody a bit of grief, and how it handles that.
Yeah.
Uniformity is generally okay, good in SDR. In the HDR, you start to see a few little things come in, but it is a $4,500 monitor, not a $45,000 monitor.
It's worth remembering,
You have to keep things in context, and it's a true 10-bit HDMI panel. It doesn't have SDI, so it's from same as Eizo.
So we're hooking up exactly the same from the Resolve through there with the Ultra Studio straight in HDMI. So.
And it's worthwhile to say that HDMI, there's nothing wrong with HDMI signal compared to SDI. Just SDI is easier and more robust, and you tend to have less issues with legal levels and data levels that you may get with HDMI. But HDMI coming from the Ultra Studio is a really good way to run these monitors. It's a wide gamut monitor, so again it calibrates really well down to Rec 709, and the grayscale tracking was really quite impressive actually when I calibrated it. And as we mentioned, it's got HDR capabilities.
I don't have to move so far where she's starting to change just off her nose. And a lot of the times when we're talking about viewing angles, we're talking about the up and down angle as well. So it can be an issue if you've got a client that's walking around and standing up and is looking down. And that's also if you had a monitor that's on the wall and it's raked too far back, that can be an issue. So in terms of SDR, like I've been using it HDR and I've been playing in HDR, I think it's good. I mean, it does have that setting out the box SDR, but they do supply one of these guys, Stuart, don't they? And what's the story here?
Well, this is the little i1 Display Pro. There's 1,000 different versions of them. You have to be a little bit careful because you can get them that are locked to certain brands. They can be like the Calman C6 is an i1 Display Pro. There's the retail version. There's the OEM version. So it can get a bit complicated, but this is really the only low-cost probe that I would recommend you'd use.
That's the X-Rite one, isn't it?
That's the X-Rite i1 Display Pro. It's the most common probe. It's a really quite a good little probe.
And that ships with the monitor. So I know Kevin from the ICA, my business partner in there, he's played around, calibrated them up in SDR, and reckons it calibrates pretty well. Yeah. So another good thing if you want to get involved in calibrating. Apart from that, it talks with Calman and Light Illusion, like the others?
Yeah, Lightspace, yes.
Lightspace.
Yeah, so with Lightspace, Lightspace talks to the OEM version from X-Rite, so they make it really complicated. So if you went and bought an i1 Display Pro from your local camera store, for instance, or wherever you bought it from, and you try to use it with Lightspace, it would come up with an error password lock. But there is a hack that gets around that. So
hack? We're not that sort of show.
I thought we were two old hacks, mate. So yeah, so it's just a simple DLL. You just put into Lightspace, so you can use a retail version of that with Lightspace, and away you go. So, but it's the if you're going to want to have a low cost probe, as a colorimeter, that's the one I recommend. And you basically go from the i1 Display Pro in the colorimeters to something like the CR100 from Colorimetry Research. That's 5,000 US, and you then go, and that's in competition to the Klein K10, which is also around about, I think, the 6,000 to 7,000 US mark. So you have a very, very large jump in colorimeters from probably $400 US, maybe a bit less, to 5,000 in the colorimeter mode. So, but it's a good little colorimeter.
It is, and the difference between that and the Eizo self-calibrating is that we can place this where we want, or more normally to more the centre of the screen.
Yeah.
And you can drive patches through Resolve as well if you're using the light space or the Calman option.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I'm not too fond of in this Asus is reaching around the back and fiddling with these controls. Now, I know after having it in here for a couple of weeks, you sort of know where they are, but you're constantly hitting the wrong button and turning the monitor off, and it has like a toggle switch. And you probably would get to used to it, but at the beginning, I'm a bit of a fan of having some buttons on the front.
No, well, that's the computer thing
Yeah.
against the broadcast monitor.
It
They're all a bit that way.
Yeah, that's the difference. But for the price, and I think I said about 4.5, and I don't know what the new one will be coming Q4. I think it's a good option, especially if you want to play some HDR games.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that new monitor coming. I think that's.
As you can see here, we have moved on to the Flanders. This is the CM250, which is an OLED, which is pretty hard to come by. They're not selling these new, but you may come hold of one of these second hand. This was really like the real workhorse of the grading post-production for probably nearly 10 years. You would see these in a lot of places, wouldn't you? And the Sony's, the PVMs as well. This size, so it's a 24, it's smaller, but this was just a real workhorse for a number of years.
Yeah.
So imagine I bought this second hand. I can just jump on my laptop and go, anyone got one of these monitors, get all the settings, go to the front panel, dial them all in. It's going to be good, isn't it?
I don't want to be Mr. Negative here. But no, especially if you've got an old monitor, because as they age, and we've discussed before, things change. Even if you had a calibration LUT from a year ago, it's going to have changed from that time.
Yeah.
So there is only one avenue you can do, and that's to actually get it properly calibrated. There are actually people who sell settings in the home theatre market for TVs that you can go and buy for €5 or something, the settings to plug into your television. But each individual monitor or TV, if you're in the home theatre market, are different. We're all individuals, like the old Monty Python quote, but you can't just get any old settings and apply them to your monitor. I said, even if you buy a second-hand monitor and it's been calibrated over a year ago, I can guarantee that'll still be wrong.
Yeah. Good.
So the answer is no cigar.
So Flanders, this is the OLED, the one that they are selling more of now. I'm going to say it's the most popular monitor in the world for post-production and colour grading, is the DM240, which is an LCD, and that is recommended retail around 4,200 US. Stu, what do you think the big differences between the OLED and the LCD in terms of the colorist?
The big is the black level. So the black level on OLED is a typical black level of almost 0. And the black level on the DM240, which I just calibrated one yesterday, actually is around about the 0.067, 0.07 of a nit. So it doesn't get anywhere near as black as the capabilities on the OLED. The uniformity or the off-angle view on the OLED is much better than the DM240. The DM240 is a really nice monitor, calibrated up excellently as Flanders do. Uniformity, again, is excellent, but you have to be sitting on square on again, so you can talk about that in your little bit. 10-bit HDMI in. Again, then the big difference between a broadcast monitor and the computer monitors is it has SDI. It is a 2K SDI, but it does 12 and 10-bit, and it has a wide colour gamut, and it comes with the features which I really like and are quite incredibly useful for me, is there's things like scopes that you can just hit a function button and up pop the scopes. You can put DIT LUTs in there, so you can have calibration LUTs, but then you can have DIT LUTs over the top of that. Yeah. And it's a nice little model. It's a 24-inch, but that's the grading issue. But in technical wise, I think it's typical Flanders. It's excellent.
And only HD though, so that is
HD.
That is a drawback now, isn't it? I think that's why they're. I mean, having said that, it's still a heap of our work we're delivering HD, but just having the ability to go to 4K or turn everything up and just check it in 4K, you've seen it in 4K rather than just, you know, relying on rendering a 4K and not seeing it.
But I'll ask a question: how many of the independent colorists out there can run 4K in real time off their computers? Most of the time, even if you run a 4K timeline, you're going to output into HD 25p or 24p. Yeah. So you can still edit in 4K, but you're going to be still monitoring or your timeline's going to be in HD, and then you can form in 4K, because a lot of people still don't have the power to be able to run 4K.
I agree, because there's no colour space or gamma change going between 4K and HD, so a lot of people would do that for speed. They've already got the monitor, it's HD, so I think the DM240's still got a lot of life. I mean, if I'm getting right across here, I'm starting to see her change slightly, scan a little bit green, and your up and down axis the same, is a bit off. In terms of grading with the OLED, like what Stu said, it is it's really nice with the black level. So this is the thing I did, a remote grade I did for Scotland. You can get some really good luscious blacks and the pictures do look great. Now there's the argument, well, how are they going to look elsewhere if we've got such a fantastic deep solid blacks and people don't have that at home? A lot of people have got OLED TVs, haven't they?
They have, yes. And the other thing I would mention that with what we do with OLEDs now, and the same thing with the Sony, is that the white point between an OLED white and an LCD white can look different, even though they measure exactly the same. So we use a perceptual white point on those. But in essence, I think if you're going to be looking at top grading, the OLED, that does give you that advantage with the blacks and stuff like that. But again, you can also put in different calibration LUTs if you wanted to go and simulate another screen, say an LCD screen or something like that. Then you can put a LUT into user 2 or something like that and call that up and have a look at that and double check that as well. So it's got a lot of functionality and features available and at the fingertip with your function buttons down the front and that sort of thing. Very easy.
Function buttons, I do like them out the front. Maybe, you know, they don't look so nice, but just being able to hear audio, toggle through, that's a really nice feature for me to have those there. So imagine this is the DM240, it's the LCD, and someone says, I want you to match that to my LG OLED, my C8 for the clients. Is that a biggie matching the LCD to the OLED? Calibration wise, if this was the DM240?
It is, in terms of you're trying to match a consumer TV to a professional broadcast monitor, so they're much stable, especially coming out of blacks. I find that the Flanders and the Sony, like the PVM series, which is quite common, they have a much nicer coming out of blacks than what the normal OLEDs, especially the C9 has some issues with the coming out of the blacks. But in general terms, you can get them to be very, very close. You just have to play with the white point. So the white point offsets are slightly different between an RGB OLED and the white, red, green, blue OLED on an LG or a Panasonic. Any of those are all the LG panels. But you can get them pretty close. It just takes a bit of work, and you've got to be a little bit on the understanding that you're not going to get the same shadow detail in a consumer telly that you tend to get.
What's your phone number again? Do you need me to put it back up there?
On the website.
Uniformity, good. Like this is at least 5 or 6 years old, this guy, and it has done a lot of use. It's been a really good workhorse. I would say again, perception with Flanders. You buy one, no one's going to question what's that. I've not heard of that. Everyone will go, yeah, great company. If you send it back to them, they will calibrate it for you and ship it back for free for the life of the monitor.
We've got a really critical feature project, then you'd obviously get it calibrated and checked probably before that, because it's very cheap in terms of the actual overall, the circumstances of how much that would be worth in business to you. But if you're in the mode we're talking about here is the independents doing normal work, not the high level Hollywood type stuff, then every 6 months, if you go more than 12 months, then you can say pretty well categorically it's going to be an uncalibrated monitor.
You know, in terms of the cost for someone to come in like yourself, wherever around the world, it probably starts at around 300 US, and every monitor is going to be slightly different. And that's actually profiling a 3D LUT that will then go into the monitor. I think it's worth pointing out, someone like Stuart is not coming and putting the probe and fiddling with all the color settings on the front with all the biases and things. It's the LUT that's actually making it and getting it correct. That's true, isn't it? So we've now swapped out, and it's a pretty easy swap. We've gone to the BenQ. Now, I'm going to be totally honest here, I've not graded with this monitor, but I've been hearing a few things about it recently, and that's why we've brought it in here just for this comparison. Let me just run a few images. It's 27, Stuart, yeah?
27 inch, yes.
This actual model is not UHD, is it?
No, this is a 2560 by 1440, which is a common pixel ratio for these types of monitors. 27 inch, so the 32 inch, which is a UHD 3840 by 2160, is just being released, hasn't arrived in Australia yet, it might be in the US. And that's a true 4K monitor. I haven't actually seen that one, but I have spent a lot of hours with the PV270 and I quite like it. So
yeah,
the reason I was looking for a monitor that was at a good price but had to be able to be calibrated, and so I came across the BenQ and had a look at it, and it calibrates up really, really well. It's quite easy. It's got 2 calibration slots in it, so I run say like a Rec 709, and then I might run an Adobe RGB, or I might run DCI P3 as a second slot. But yeah, it works really well.
10-bit?
It's a 10-bit panel, but it's an 8-bit with the FRC, so frame rate control.
Okay.
But I haven't seen any banding issues or anything like that.
That was the only thing I'd be concerned about. Is I was just doing a job the other day where the editor's only just using like one of these, didn't see there was actually proxy shots cut into the show and had not been picked up on. And I'm looking at them going, and they were just like Avid DNXs are in there with the RAW. And there's banding in shots. I ended up with some 8-bit shots. And it's just hard, and I don't say that's a fault on editors, but they're trying to pick, because we've got all these files now, we've got these RAWs, different codecs, different qualities. You can't be getting your nose against a monitor and checking for these things, and you're banding in skies that we're seeing a lot of these sort of prosumer cameras and drones and things. You can really see it and dial into it on these pro monitors, and that's the case of all of them we've seen so far. Yeah,
no, I haven't come across any banding on this one at all. Yeah. So, as I said, you can set it up for your 100 nits. So this interfaces with Lightspace and Calman. The black levels is probably the only thing. It's about, really in theory, it's 0.1 of a nit, so it gets down to about 0.12. Yeah. But uniformity is fantastic. I've measured within 1% across the screen. Calibration-wise, it calibrates really well. Color volume, when you go and have a look at that within Lightspace and the LUT analysis after doing a full profile and then a verification, it's really quite nice. I've had VFX artists use it. He said the only thing that I would like to see slightly better is the black levels. Yeah. But then the Eizo, it's the same thing, which is an $8,000 Australian type monitor. Yeah. Is not hugely better, and same with the DM240. So they are better than this, of course, but
I would say I would definitely prefer the 32. I think now that we are seeing bigger displays at home, in the homes, then we need a bigger display in the room as well. So the 32 for me, and the 4K one, I would always spend the extra money because it's not going away. We're only going to see bigger resolutions.
One point I would make out, I think we've discussed before, is that with all these BenQ players, Asus coming into, probably less so Eizo because they've always been at the top end of that market. But those sort of the BenQs and the Asus have a huge model range from, like you can buy a monitor from your computer store for $150 or something like that, all the way through. So be careful of the brand perception and choose the right monitor, because, you know, someone will say, oh, I bought this, you know, BenQ or an Asus that was, you know, for $300 and the uniformity was terrible.
Yes.
Whereas they have their flagship type models, and they put a lot more engineering into providing quality at their high end. So don't make that mistake of saying, I'm just going to get this brand. You need to look at the model number as well, especially with these sort of computer brands.
I've said it, you know, I've probably said it before in other podcasts and webinars, you know, I'd rather be having your $2,000 BenQ that's calibrated and I have confidence in it than my Eizo that I don't. And I don't know if it's been calibrated or it hasn't been calibrated for a while, because it doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't have to be the most expensive that you can buy, but you just need confidence as a colorist. If you are sitting with a DP or director and they say to you, oh, has it been calibrated? Are you happy with it? And you go, yes, it's good, I'm happy. You can see this sense of relief come off them, because they've obviously been in situations where, and we'll talk later about grading on other sort of devices where there's no confidence. And if you haven't got the confidence as a colorist, I can't impart the confidence 100%. To a director, and they will notice that straight away. And it's very hard to grade a job if you're constantly thinking, oh, that looks a little bit magenta down there, and you're trying to compensate it, and you're just thinking, can I get through this job? It's really no way to be working. So, as I always say, second most important thing in the room, no switches and knobs out the front.
Yeah,
no, they're secret. Oh, really? Wow.
They're just soft touch stuff. You want to change the calibration slot.
A bit like the Eizo,
yeah. Yeah,
okay,
very similar. So you go like that. So that's all just, you know, your menu is from here, so you can go and see where you're at, your colour adjustments. Cool. So it's quite easy to do that.
Just leave it with me, eh? Yeah.
So, but I've put that calibrated against a calibrated Eizo and a calibrated PV Sony. Yeah. And just looking at picture quality, you know, nothing, no measurement tools, but just the eyes, and it matches extremely well. So I'm really happy to it. I wouldn't, be honest with you, I wouldn't put this into somewhere that I wasn't happy with it.
No, I've heard good things. Let me just have a look at the old viewing angle. It's not bad. Yeah, it drops away a little bit there. Yeah, she gets a little bit green. It's most of all these monitors we've talked about. It's two people at the front, and I always say, if I've got a client that's not exactly at the front all the time, and I say come up and view, I normally slide out the way. I let them slide right in the middle there and go, right, let's watch it. Make a point of them, you know, not being too close. We've got the right lighting environment, and tell me what you think. Because that's important. Occasionally you'll have the client that's a little bit off axis making comments, and you're thinking, I'm not quite sure what they're looking at. They're not looking at the same, and they're not, because they're off axis. So Stuart, do you recognise this guy?
I do, and it's the one that I hate the most.
This is the Myth. So here we go. It's just for the web. So I'll colour it on my laptop, iMac, because that's what everyone's going to view it on. And we have actually got the iMac in here, hence we've turned this off. So in this little exercise, we are pretending we are just going to colour it on the iMac GUI. Why is this not a good idea, Stuart?
Well, first I think it's just for the web, reeks of total disrespect for your work, for the people who shot it, for the people who are going to view it.
Yeah.
And if you have that attitude, then maybe you should do something else. That's my frank. It just seems to me that you don't care about what you're doing. The other thing is that now that people have smart TVs, they might have the LG OLED, the Panasonic OLED, the Sony's, whoever's screen, they might have it calibrated for home theatre. A lot of people now are getting content from the web, whether it be YouTube or something like that, and a lot of that content is shot very well. So the old days that the web is just a down-res computer screen that was nothing are long gone. The web is now one of the most important avenues of content viewing for the viewer. But again, I get back to, if you're going to create something, shouldn't you do your best by it?
Yeah, exactly the same. For what I do, for what Nick does, Nick's shooting this for us, it's no different. You know, just because it's going to be an internet piece, we've still got to do the same things, because people are not stupid. When they look at something, they know if it doesn't look good or it doesn't look right. You basically got to have the same values. So really it doesn't hold up. The other argument is, well, the problem is with these displays, and no one really knows what color space or gamma they're running on them or anything at all. So they can render out, but they don't really know what they've got. There's nothing quantifiable about what they've made. So yeah, they might get lucky and it might go good on a few devices, but then if you've got to transform it to something and you don't know what you've got to transform it to anything else, it's just a bit of a slippery slope, I think.
There are ways to calibrate them. And
Yeah.
you should be able to calibrate the screens themselves. It's just a little bit different because you start, if you're running Resolve, for instance, then you need to run calibrate and put the LUT in Resolve, which is a really useful feature of Resolve.
Yeah.
I think it's got a lot over other. So you can, but that's only for the color viewer.
Yes.
And if you're running an iMac, there are ways you can use the display profiles, but those display profiles are just really generic profiles. They're not a profile that's a calibrated profile to your screen. So really that feature in Resolve is worthless. The other thing is that Macs since Sierra have had a broken ICC profile management where you can only use a matrix profile and not a LUT-based profile. Having said that, I have a lot of people who use these in a studio with their broadcast monitor or a Mac of some variety, and they use Photoshop as creating graphics. So you can create an ICC version 4 profile, which I use Spaceman from Light Illusion, which is a full 3D LUT, and that gets embedded into the profile, and Photoshop will recognize that profile and then color manage. So to use a profile of that variety with any computer system, that application has to be a color managed application and smart enough to use it.
The glossy screen, reflective screen, we're sort of seeing ourselves in it, is not ideal as well, I would have thought.
No, your room environment, because you get flare.
More so.
We have to be really careful in any room environment, but probably obviously more so with the glossy screen and having lights coming and reflecting back. If you've got practicals in the corner or something like that, that might come back and hurt your screen. But it is possible, like everything, so long as it's calibrated properly, but there is some more complexities within calibrating a computer system than you would have calibrating an Eizo, BenQ, Flanders, what the monitors we've looked at so far, than you would with a computer monitor.
But as soon as you start to bill, and you're starting to bill for your color correction services, then if the client rocks up and you just have this, or you just have this, yeah, because you don't have both, in Resolve you're working with that as your viewer and you don't have any external monitors, you can do with an iMac, but we're not talking about that, are we? We're talking about just grading on the iMac screen. Then I think you may be shortchanging your clients a little bit, and probably yourself long term as well, by doing that. And I know it is money and you do have to invest, but long term I think it's going to be a good option. So I'd say probably much use these as your workhorse, but use one of these guys, send it out to your Flanders or your Eizo. What we talked about is probably your option.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Good. Oh, we can move this out of the way now. We'll bring something better in, shall we?
Yep.
The truck's outside. All right. All I've basically done is just moved my scope monitor that I was using. I'm going to call it like a Dell type. It's a $200 sort of extra monitor you would use with your PC or something, and just moved it to the middle. And this has led me on to another myth here, which is our last one. I've got a $200 type, and it doesn't have to be Dell. There's hundreds of people make these. I can use the clean feed out of Resolve. So just to clarify what this is, I'm going to pop that off. Oh my God. It's crazy because I've seen this image a lot of times in training where I immediately want to go, I'm just going to correct it and make it look normal. And it's really yellow. Okay, so the reason we can do this now, and I'm not using any of the Blackmagic kit to do it, you can do it, which I think is like 16.1 they implemented it. Workspace, video, clean feed. And I'll go down and select the monitor, which is my Dell there. So I've got the GUI on this side. I've got the grading monitor there. I can do all the cool things that I would be doing before. Make the picture look really horrible.
Didn't have to.
Didn't have to, it was there, sure. So what do you, I think that it's pretty obvious what our problems are here. What do you,
Okay,
what do you think?
It's the same as the iMac, but you're using a computer graphics process. So you, in terms of the pathway within the system, you're using ICC profiles or video card gamma tables. You need to make sure that they're all correct, and there's no OS profile causing problems. So the way to calibrate that would be to calibrate a normal computer style monitor in the ICC profile method, and then you can then calibrate it and put that LUT in Resolve as a viewer. The issue you have is that the monitors you're now trying to grade to are not designed for this level of accuracy. They're low end. So we've mentioned Dell. We're just using Dell as a generic low cost computer monitor name. So the way they handle blacks, the way they handle contrast, their color, linearity, they're just simply not designed to be able to be used in a grading mode. So in other words, what you're doing, which is why I laughed before, is that you put this up, the picture was horribly yellow, and your first thing you did as a colorist was dive for the controls, which I found pretty funny, because that's the natural reaction you do, is that you think there's something wrong with the picture and needs color correction, whereas in fact it's actually the monitor which is wrong. So you would be trying to color grade and correct for the deficiencies in the monitor. So in everything you do, you have to know that the pathway through is an accurate pathway and that your monitor is accurate before you even start getting onto those controls.
Yeah, and it's something, obviously if you're in an edit suite, probably all you've got is this second screen, and that's why the Blackmagic have implemented this mainly for editing. I'm not saying it's for colouring, it's for editing. People want to see a bigger screen for editing. One thing you can do though is just put a grey frame on, and we can see it's grey here on the Eizo. You look at this, it confirms to you again, it's got that yellow cast through it.
And uniformity errors all over the place.
It is an older type monitor, but that's a good check. And sometimes you'll get a client say, well, I actually like what I've got there on the GUI, which might be wrong, but they like that. Then you've got to try and work back to this, and you can get in all sorts of knots. So get the GUI calibrated as well, so they look the same. And
well, yeah, because the human visual system, we're very bad at looking at something by itself and judging what color is, saturation and stuff. But we're very, very good when you've got two images side by side of picking the difference. Like they stand out very clearly a lot of the time. So it doesn't have to be, this is not subtle, but even subtle differences can be important to try and calibrate out, because if you have a client there, then they, again, might choose the one you don't want them to choose.
Normally they would do, All right, cool. That's been interesting. That's amazing putting that up like that. I mean, I have had this monitor a while, but it's probably should go to skip.
Well, it's your scope monitor, isn't it?
It is my scope monitor, We'll give it. It's
Be
done.
kind.
Turn it off and on, it works. Hey, what more do I need? Now, in case you hadn't noticed, we have a slightly bigger telly. My kids are screaming because I've literally dragged it out of the lounge and brought it in here. I've had to rearrange things a little bit, and obviously this is not the ideal distance viewing environment that we would be using, but quite a lot of people are using these bigger displays now for grading. So this is a B7, but if you think of it, any of these LG, C9, C8, those similar type OLED, good quality domestic monitors, this is what this is. I often grade in Starbucks or some sort of McDonald's or cafe. It'd be fine. Is that when most people are going to watch my film? it's not ideal. You can edit a show, can't you, in a McDonald's or a Starbucks? Fine, headset editing, it doesn't matter. But for color correction, you've got to be in some sort of qualified environment, some calibrated environment, and that goes to the color of your walls, and you've not got too many colored paintings. Your monitor is the right distance away from you for the size of it. The wall is lit behind it. Lots of things go into it. So though people say this, I still think you've got to have these rules for color correction. And it goes back again. If you're charging for your services, then clients will expect that you have something that's calibrated and it's a standalone monitor. It's, in my eyes, you know, that's a given. That's the minimum that you need.
Yep.
Let's just have a little look at what we've got here. So this is actually a B7, but like I said, think of any of those types. So it's 55. Sure, I think there's been a problem with the 65s with the coloured edges and it being uniform across the screen.
Yeah, uniformity has been a bit of an issue with the 65, but it's a consumer panel, so variability is going to be part of the game, and not everyone can go and get 10 panels and choose the best one. You're normally going to go down to your local retailer and have whatever is coming out of the store at that time. But yeah, the uniformity is one thing. Variability in terms of stability is probably one of the big things with the OLED, because they can have thermal stability problems because they can heat up. On the whole, the LG in particular has been the most popular in post-production because the ability to have internal LUTs and calibrate them, which really started in sort of 2007, but 2018 to the wider world where you could interface with CalMan directly, and then Lightspace interfaces through an application called Device Control, which works really, really well. And so you've got about 5 slots, I think, 5 slots you can separately calibrate within the LG.
Yeah.
But you need to, the calibration on these takes quite a long time. It takes about 3 hours.
You're saying 3 hours.
Yeah, because you need to allow for the thermal instability of it. So we put a black patch in between the coloured patches, so that extends the time.
Yes.
And that'll depend on your probe. So if you're using an i1 Display Pro, it'll take quite a long time. You don't get the light level, the low light level accuracy. You get into, say, a CR100 or a Klein 10, and they're much faster. That's 2.5 times faster than that. So when you're running a large volume, which you need to run a 17-point cube on these to get them accurate. And so it does take quite a lot of time to do. C9s have had some issues with black clipping. I saw one yesterday I calibrated. That seems to have been an issue. Apparently it's been rectified in the CX version, which is the 2020 version.
Yeah.
But in general, you can get them pretty accurate and they're cheap.
I was, and I mentioned it on the Colour 2 podcast again. My buddies Erica Wade at Auto Ego, they have about 20 of these. They have one for the colorist, one for the client. Get them calibrated more or less exactly the same. They love the fact it's a bigger display right at the front of the room. And they looked at all the others and they made a choice to go here. And it was an interesting call, but because they were cheaper, they could buy 20 and put them 2 in each room and not have to worry about having different technologies. And it's working for them. They are primarily commercials, but I think it could be quite a good option.
But you can get them accurate, but it does take a lot of time and you can't take shortcuts, and they're most definitely not accurate out of the box. But the beauty is you can tweak them up, but there's no shortcuts. Yeah, so
this is the story with this guy.
This is the service remote. For me, because I use Lightspace, to be able to defeat the auto dimming on the still image. So with the OLED, if you keep a plate up, a still image up like that, talk that with a client, then after a certain period of time, it will automatically dim. So there's 2 dimming functions. There's if you're running a very high nit level, it'll auto dim in the video content you're playing. But there's also, if you're running, say, at 100 nits, if you leave a still image on for a long period of time, it'll detect that and then automatically dim the screen down. So
this little fella here allows you to override that that setting.
I have that problem watching Netflix though.
That's correct.
The picture starts to go dim, and I'm watching a show.
There is issues around that, but it depends on how bright your screen is. But normally, we've found that in the 100 nit, but there are issues around that dimming that the word is that LG are aware of.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But for this one here, for the still image, if you're running 100 nits and you just put a still image up on a plate and you're talking to your client.
Yeah, like we're chatting away at this.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden that'll start to dim. So you can turn that off, but you need this special remote control to do that.
Any other things we're doing on there that you can't do with a normal one? Or is that the main
Yes,
reason?
this allows you to get into the engineering menus.
Yes.
So this has got two functions. It allows you to get in and turn the auto dimming for the still off.
Yeah.
And then you can get into the white balance and the 22-point grayscale curves if you want to go and calibrate that yourself, which is what you can use for. So if you're doing a HDR calibration, you get into that mode and you calibrate the 2.2 gamma curve, and then the LG will automatically then apply an EOTF from 2.2 to PQ or HLG. So yeah, so that service menu allows you to get into the unit, and if you wanted to, you pretty well destroy your screen if you press the wrong buttons. So it's not something to be just left lying around. If you have one, I would hide it away in a cupboard. Yeah. If you go into number 13, the OLED, the function that we have is the TPC, which is I'm not quite sure what TPC stands for, but turning that off means that if you have a still image on the screen, it won't dim.
Right.
So if you do that, you have to be aware that if you leave a still image on for a long period of time, you get burning.
Yeah. Yeah. These can be good for SDR grading.
Correct.
Could you use it like HDR practice grading? Is that people doing that, or is that not really?
Well, the problem with these OLEDs, which are a white, red, green, and blue OLED, is that the red, green, and blue run out of steam at 400 nits. So basically, anything above that is monochrome. So it's just a peak white luminance. So the answer to your question, I mean, you can practice grading on anything, I guess, but the issue you have is that you have no colour above basically 400 nits as a rule of thumb, if you like, which is why you certainly can't use them for critical grading. You have to go and get, at this current point in time, you have to get the expensive HDR grading monitor. There's no ifs or buts. You certainly couldn't charge a client to grade HDR.
No, it would be just
and do the right thing by them at least anyway.
I think so. Yeah, she drops away pretty quickly there. You don't have to go too far. But again, you're sitting here a lot of the time on your own, maybe not even with a client. And if you're bang in the middle of it, it is good. Obviously, I'd like to be back a bit more in the real world, but I think it's pretty good.
No, they're a 10-bit panel.
They're 10,
So if you just have to. The cheaper you spend on the telly, the more you're going to spend in terms of calibration and time.
Exactly.
If you try and take a shortcut calibrating them, the picture will look
6 months calibration time with these guys, or a bit more? Or they drift a bit more?
Well, they drift while you're looking at them, to be honest with you.
You'll have to move in, Stuart.
So no, but it's the same. You would be wanting to keep an eye on them. And the thing you have with these, a lot of people have the broadcast grading monitor in front of them, and this on the wall above them for the client.
Yeah.
So you just have to remember the fact that your client might see both the grading monitor and this together, so any differences will be very apparent. And so the perceptual white point in this is slightly different to the PVM RGB OLEDs like your Flanders or the Sony PVM. So matching the colours and the white point is a little bit. Need to take a bit of time. So, but the thing you can do, because it's got multiple slots, you can create a LUT and then create a white point offset. So you can do a Rec 709 standard D65, which will look a bit green to most people. You can do basically the PVM, which I've created that I do, which I found all the colourists are very happy with, and then there's the white point that's for the OLEDs, which is basically what Dolby derived from their 13 people, a bit like the Guild and Wright experiments. Yeah. And try and match them. But you can, if you've got a colorist, sometimes a good idea that I like to do is to get the broadcast monitor and this screen here, and then just make sure that they're happy with them, because everybody's different.
Yeah.
As a vision.
Yeah.
And to make sure that the wide is, so to get them exactly correct is a little bit difficult, but you can get them very, very close. I think.
Yeah.
Really so close that it doesn't matter.
I've heard some really good things on them. I just want to mention notable others, and we probably have forgotten some. Postium, TV Logic, Sony. Obviously, Sony have got a huge reputation in monitors. Thanks for watching. Hope this has been useful. You can find us on our websites and hit us up with questions there.
Yeah, I'm pretty hopeless at social media.
It'll never catch on, mate.
Mate, I'll have to get you to do it for me.
It'll never catch on, yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks to Nick. Nick's
Nick.
been shooting.
Yeah,
Nick, Pointon Films, well done, buddy. You're a star.
Someone on staff to do it.
Yeah.
We're live. Hey guys, so now I bet you're more confused than ever, aren't you, after watching that? So hopefully that made things a little bit more clearer on some of your options. Obviously, we're only talking about SDR there. There's no HDR. HDR could be something we could look at down the road, but it dispelled a few of the myths. And I think the bottom line is your monitor is the second most important thing in the room. My favorite catchphrase. And is important. Now, I want to go to Dario first, because Dario's does a lot of his work in Manhattan. I'm going to say he's our beauty, makeup, fashion expert. So, Dario, obviously very important in your side of work. What gear have you got and why? Why did you choose those?
So I have a Flanders CM250. I do everything in HD and SDR, just mostly because that's where the fashion industry lies right now. So a CM250 that I would occasionally calibrate or check with my own probe, which is just a C6 OEM that comes from Calman. But when I have downtime or in between, bouncing between my home setup and the work setup, I would also send it into Calman. I would send it into Flanders, which they do everything for free. I'd have a downtime of a week on the monitor, and I make sure that they're super sticklers about it, and I have them calibrate my my Flanders every once a year, every 6 months or so. So my client monitor at home, which is just for indie filmmakers who want to come, or the occasional smaller agency, it's still a Panasonic BT300, which still meets all the specs when I'm having it calibrated. I've babied it to hell, and I've taken care of it over the years. That is connected via SDI as well. The suite at Bonfire, I was able to get a PVM A250 Sony, and that was the last of the OLEDs. And then my client monitor in that suite is a Panasonic FZ1000. It's not the GZ, which can do Dolby Vision. I got the monitor one model back because it was about $1,000 cheaper. That got to me for about, I think it was $5,500. And I picked the Panasonic over the LG C9 because it's the same glass as the LG. But it has different drivers. It doesn't have any of the backlighting, dimming issues. It also has a better calibration, or at least a better integration with Calman when it comes to loading any of the profiles and being checked. And the thing that I've learned, by running around as a freelancer, is in many facilities they'll buy, a slew of the LG monitors. They will check them, calibrate them, and anyone that's not working right or a little bit off, they'll return. And since I didn't have the benefit of that, I'm paying twice the price of an LG, but they vet those monitors. There's no pixel issues. There's nothing else. And it essentially, I'm paying aggravation tax by having the monitor completely not have any grief and be no fall off, no any other issues. So I have that in the suite, the FZ1000, and it does a really great job.
So you've obviously got to be right close. I'm going to say, especially if you're doing beauty work, skin work, you definitely want to be. That's why you've got to have the better quality, definitely 10-bit, and you've got to have total confidence there, haven't you, in that type of work?
Absolutely. And then it's all about, and we were kind of talking about it offline, it's very hard when you have a client who's extremely color sensitive, almost to a fault, where they're looking at things that don't even matter in the shot, but everything has to be consistent. And I was able to, the Sony and the Panasonic, because of the color space, they're and I have a 55, not a 65, because the 65 in that screen range can have some fall off. That it has to be dead on. If there's any amount of doubt, it causes trust issues inside a suite, and that's a whole other conversation itself.
Yeah.
And you want to eliminate any possibilities of that, because there's already enough problems that happens with shoots and certain things that happens when things aren't lit right, or depending on if it's being shot on red compared to ARRI to anything else, and there's noise, and they didn't see it on their screen, but now they're seeing it on a bigger screen. You have to be technically aware how to explain all that and maintain the confidence and just be up on your game when it comes to your knowledge of the screens, of the technology, of the compression.
Cool, man. Stuart, one of the questions for you there, we often hear a TV is CalMount ready or Lightspace ready. Does that mean that the software is actually installed on the set, so you don't need the software outside? Because people have been asking some questions. How does that work?
No. All it just means is that the monitor can interface to those calibration applications. So normally, it's depending on the monitor. Some have internal patch generators, but generally, as a baseline, it means that you can connect, say, USB or Ethernet or something, and so you might profile the display, create a LUT, and allows you to load that LUT from that program up into the monitor. So the Eizos and Flanders, BenQs, the Asus, all those, you calibrate, that allows you to load the LUT using directly into a slot. So it talks to that monitor. Some of the monitors have internal patch generators, so the Lightspace or CalMount can use that internal patch generator to create the patches for you. But no, you've got to go and give them money.
How do you find using the patches in Resolve if you're linking your Resolve with your calibration software? Does that work just as well, or use an external pattern generator?
Well, it works fine. So it depends on your application where you are, but using the Resolve as a patch generator is a good way to do it, especially if you're doing your own systems and that sort of thing. So there's a couple of different patch generators you can use. I actually use the HDMI out of the laptop quite often, because that's a proper RGB output. With Lightspace, they've got the Raspberry Pi, which is basically an almost no-cost patch generator in data levels. It's bit perfect. Or you can use Resolve and use the mini monitor. There are a few little issues with the mini monitor because it's using with its component to RGB conversion, causes a bit of nonsense at the bottom end. So if you can use that, the new one I noticed they've just released today or yesterday, that can be operating in an RGB mode, which is the best way. So you don't have component to RGB conversions, but in general terms, what you're doing, the Resolve works fine. Cool. That's a patch generator.
All right, cool, buddy. Right, Wade, I'm going to do a quick, Q&A. You got to give me an answer here. Quick. How many LGs do you have?
We have about 15 in use up on the walls at any one time. And then we have several others in the back room that are constantly getting calibrated and ready to switch out. And so we probably have about 20 of them in total.
And the next question is, how often are you sort of calibrating them? Is it regular, or are you looking at them going, I think that one needs to be looked at? How do you manage that?
It's a little bit of both. There's a calibration schedule. There's also, the colorist eye going, hang on, that one's, that there's something funny with that one now, I've just noticed in the last day or so. So, by the time you've looked at the monitor for that long, you start to know it's quirks, or you jump to another room and you instantly walk in and go, there's something wrong with that one. So, they do get calibrated, but there's also if it needs doing sooner than that, then we're definitely on the case of we can swap it out, bring a new one in.
Cool. How far do you sit back from an LG?
Probably closer than you're supposed to, than the recommended thing. I think I saw in the chat there as well. Like, I like to sit close. So, I like to see the grain structure and the noise detail and all that sort of stuff, and be closer than the client would, so that I can kind of see everything that's there. And for us, that was part of the reason that we chose the LGs, because of the size of them. That you can see all the detail that we sort of found on a smaller monitor. If our clients are looking on a large screen, you could be missing that sort of stuff. So yeah, probably twice the vertical height back from the monitor,
And
something like that.
has a client ever said to you, I wish it was on a smaller screen?
No. They can watch it on their iPhone if they want that. No, our suites are quite, they're quite large, so the clients are a reasonable way back from the screen. So we actually have our client monitors on articulating arms, so we can kind of move it and angle it towards where the client's sitting in the room. Yeah,
I urge you folks listening, go and have a look on their website. They got some beautiful photos and stuff of their suite. It's a beautiful facility. All right, and so in terms of your movies, when you get a movie in, are you switching them up? You turning them into P3, or what are you doing for films? Or you got a projector in your place?
We have a projector in our theater, as well as then the LG. So it really depends on what we're finishing the movie for. If we need to finish for P3, then we'll do it that way. If the main release is going to be in 709, then we'll watch it everything in 709. We have the projector. We can check things in the background if we need to, but in that instance, if it's going to finish on television, then we'll grade it in television color space, which is
cool.
It's quite important to know where you're ending up, so you know where you've got to start.
Yeah, I think it's a good move, because there's probably a few raised eyebrows when people went, well, you're grading on that, sort of domestic type telly, but it just makes a lot of sense. And when I went there and saw that you had exactly the same as the client, and the next room's exactly the same again, there's a lot to be said, and you can't do that with other cost monitors if you've got 5-10 rooms.
No, and I just remember from telecine days, once we started to introduce a second monitor that was a different type, there was all sorts of issues. So we kind of got away from that by having 2 monitors in the room that are the same. And while they're domestic monitors, we turn everything off, and we calibrate every monitor. It takes 4, 5, 6 hours to do each one. And as Dario was saying before, we're one of those places that brings a bunch in, and if it's not good enough, we send it back. We calibrate a new one. If it meets it, we put it into circulation. Yeah. If it's not, we get rid of it. So we do try and pick the higher end models of the versions of them.
Good. Mr. Shaw, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, good video. A lot of work in there.
Yeah, there was a bit of work in there. It was fun, wasn't it? But so you've had the Asus there. I've had the Asus here. You use yours more in HDR than I've used mine, but I've been using mine in SDR. I know you've mucked around calibrating it as well. How have you found it just as an SDR display?
It calibrates very easily and absolutely perfectly, lower than Delta 1 across. So it's very easy to calibrate for SDR. That was before they introduced this Kalman and color space ready. So I haven't tried that yet. In fact, that's the next thing I'm going to do is run the internal LUTs and see. It's hard to imagine that for 709 it's going to get any better, but it's going to be a lot easier, that's for sure. And then what those LUTs also mean is that we can get better HDR calibration. HDR calibration is a whole other kettle of fish, So yeah, it's an up and up. And I think people always ask what should I buy, and there's no one answer as you showed with that video. But I think if you figure out what your priorities are, then you can find the best solution. So Wade found the best solution for them, where continuity between all the monitors and size was an issue for them. I know some people are very heavily invested in SDI routing, so that's a big deal for them. So then they'll look at Flanders. The Eizo has its advantages. I wouldn't count the calibration as one of them, but as you pointed out in the video, very easy to use, nice front control panels.
Yeah.
The other thing that you didn't mention in that video is that with the Eizo, when you load Color Navigator, you can control all those settings from your computer. You don't even have to reach over to the screen. So that's a great choice. But for me, I've been heavily invested in HDR for the last 3 years, and I'm not gonna, it's not in my budget to have. Well, there's two things. First of all, it's not in my budget to have a $30,000-$40,000 monitor in my home suite, because that's not where my final grades get done. So that's one issue. And secondly, I'm not sure, given how fast the technology is changing, Same as Wade is with the LGs. You know, he swaps them out on a regular basis. I like to be fluid. I like to be in a situation where I'm not going to say, well, this is going to last me for the next 5 years. And I love it. And another question that came up in the chat was, well, what about the GUI monitor? So I'm kind of lucky because at this price range, my GUI and my main display can be the same technology, can be the same monitor.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. I think so too. Wade, someone just said he's using 55s or 65s.
I'm just writing back to that now. Yeah, it's 55 inches for the operator ones, and some are 65 for the client ones. It just really depends on the size of the distance that the clients are from it. But the 65s definitely have their issues with some vertical lines and not being completely uniform across the thing. So really, the 55s are the best bet.
Yeah. Same for you, Dario?
Yeah, I just read about that before buying it, and also because of the size of the suite and the configuration, I was just able to I went with the 55.
And you've got the smart people sitting behind you, yeah, or are they on the side?
I have a garbage truck backing up.
Yeah.
It's early in the morning here, garbage time. So I got to go past. Because of the configuration I had in my suite, I did something that I had never done before, which is I have them next to me, but we're facing opposite ways. So I'm actually up against a desk. I can look to my right, and my clients are looking in the opposite way on another wall. This way they can't see my hero screen, which sometimes, as you know, can be an issue where if your monitor doesn't match your client monitor, it's a little bit of an issue. The disadvantage is I have to kind of move around. I can pivot and I can see the big screen behind me if I'm looking for details, if I'm pulling keys. But I have it set up so I can actually be in direct communication by just looking over to my client, and we can face each other. So that I found to be more important than having them have a big screen over my head.
And you were telling me earlier that you're sending out calibrated iPads. Is that right?
Yeah, so what we're doing right now in regards to the whole bye-bye garbage truck, we're using Streambox. But the situation is, of course, that Streambox, depending if it's being played on a browser and the app is being used, but it's still somebody's screen. Right now, we're sending out iPads to clients that I've spec'd out and checked. We send them in a road case. And as long as the brightness setting is set properly, that's the one that's completely, it might have a tiny tick less contrast, but the color is accurate, and that's the most important thing I've found for the agency clients, where they're spotting little bits of magenta in skin tone, or of course if it's the more white backgrounds fall off, you're picking up different colors. And it was a big back and forth that was problematic for a while, even finding out that we would remote into their laptop as a test, have them zoom back their screen, and we could see why they were looking. We could see what they were looking at when they were sharing the screen, and things were just way off. So we opted for, now we invested in iPads. We send them to clients. That, of course, is easier in the New York metro area. When people are outside of that area, it becomes a whole other conversation. But iPads have kind of solved our remote problem with Streambox.
Yeah, I'm getting my stuff judged on an iPad Pro.
Yeah. The iPad 3, like the Air, you can even save money like an Air for $500. As long as it's a third generation, the iPad Air will also display everything properly. And the nice thing is a client can't change much. The only thing they can do is maybe tweak the brightness. And as long as you know where to tell them to set it, you're in the game. You're in the safe place. It's
interesting. I think the thing that comes out of this is, you don't need the biggest, the best, but you need to have the confidence, and that does involve, like we said in the movie, calibrating it. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing that yourself, that's when someone like Stuart comes in, and there is a number of these people. Now, I calibrated my monitor once, and I spent the whole of the next job worried I'd done it wrongly. And I couldn't cut. I'm looking at it going, that doesn't look right. It doesn't look right. I've got to get through this job. There were so many steps, and I thought, no, this is not where my skill lies. Yeah. So then I'll hand over to Stuart and say, look, I'd rather you come in. I'd pay you the money. You do this all the time. And every 6 months or so, and that's the way it is. So you work out what works for you. And some people will love to do it and take the time, but it is a really important step, I think, that is and I always said, and I said it in the film, it comes down to when you're billing. There's certain standards. If you're charging the client that you got to have, and that's obviously one of them. And they assume that's right. Some of them obviously don't know, but that's an important thing.
Yeah,
I'd add to that too.
I do that calibration. I look at those charts and the RGBs, and even though they're looking like they're flattening out at a straight line, even after that, there's still that little element of doubt. And of course, that can't be passed on to the.
Yeah, it's just compass. Sorry, Kevin.
I was going to say, well, first of all, I agree with Dario. There's a little bit of an art. It's not just a science calibrating a monitor. But no, if you're getting calibration done, get a certificate. If you have something you can show the client that, yeah, we've done the due diligence and we've had it calibrated. Especially if you're not on a name brand monitor. Just show people that, yeah, look, it checks out. And not only does it check out, but I've had somebody look at it and make it right.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a tricky one. It is a tricky one. Stuart, what type of places are you going into? Is it just the post house, or are you going into other areas? Maybe is it broadening? Do you think people are interested in?
No, mainly I'm dealing in the post houses at the moment, and a lot of independents. So I have a bit of a mixed bag. I think it's probably the same everywhere, where we have a situation of you've got multiple suite post houses, but there's a lot of independents like yourself around now who are doing grading and setups in their own home and that sort of thing. They might have a PVM Sonys in Australia are pretty common.
Yeah, they are.
And so a lot of the work, it's probably split 50-50 to be honest with you. When I get into the bigger suites, that's when you're trying to match a like an LG or a Panasonic Plasma to a PVM Sony OLED or something like that. Next to an Apple iMac. So probably what I've done is probably sometimes there's at least 4 screens in the one suite where people want them to look exactly the same, which can be challenging. But generally, it's mainly for what I do is 50% post houses and then independents.
Film schools, yeah.
Yeah, no film schools.
Okay, well they're starting to put rooms in.
They've all got rooms.
So well, it's convincing them that then it's a start, isn't it? Baby steps with film schools.
Well, this is true. Yeah.
You gentlemen got anything else to offer in before we start to wrap this thing up?
The comment in regards to grading on your laptop because people see it on a laptop.
Yeah.
Everybody has to kind of remember that depending on how you're spitting it out. Premiere Pro is expecting Rec 709 in, even though you're looking at it on something else. We had a little offline conversation about that, and it kind of goes back and forth where there are lots of conversions happening, and even a compressor might be expecting 709 in as opposed to our sRGB 2.2, and then of course some monitors now with Apple are 1.96. So educating your client to know that it's going to look different on different browsers, depending on what browser you're on, depending on what your screen settings are, and really knowing how that all works and being able to pass that information along will help you, field all the questions, but also try and anticipate what's going to happen. Yeah, and there's no real easy answer.
Yeah, cool, man. Stuart has a really good thing on his website about gamma tags. Now, I was asking about gamma tags when we were chatting about the Rec 709A thing, and I didn't realize there were so many different tags. So he's go to his website, Aptical, and he's just listed all of them. There is a lot on there that are using tags. So I'm just going to do a little plug here. We got a survey running for the ICA about the possibility of doing a colorist summit. Probably around November time. We're running it over the weekend. So if you're keen on joining other colorists in a virtual world, it won't be in a flash resort like last year, unfortunately. But please take the survey. It's just about what software, what you would like to see, calibration, looks, high end, low end. You can fill that out. That'd be great. I would really like to thank you guys for coming and joining.
Sorry, Warren, just tell everybody where that is. It's on the ICA Facebook page.
Yeah, I put a link there, but it's also be on the Facebook page. It's in the newsletter, and it will be up on the iColorist site as well. So we'll put a link there on the homepage. Once this webinar drops off, we'll put the survey into there. and it'll be up there for another week. So that'll be really good if we can get your feedback in there. Let me just drop that link in. That link's not there. I'll just do that again. So I want to thank Marcelo as well for switching this from Sao Paulo. He's done a sterling job. I hope it looked good. And we'll catch you on the next Meet the ICA. Thanks a lot for joining, folks. And
stay healthy, stay well.
Yeah,
wear a
stay
mask.
safe, everyone.
Yeah.
We'll get through this year. Yeah. Cheers.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Well done. Cheers.